Welcome once again to Vortex Presents Seattle Soundscape. Today's guest is Omar Rashan of one-man band Charlatan, whose new album SUPERMAX is now available on cassette tape and on Bandcamp as a name-your-price digital download. His sound is reminiscent of post-punk and shoegaze gothic bands such as Joy Division and The Cure, but adds definitive individuality within its implementation of noise rock and conceptuality. But back to the album. The title itself, SUPERMAX, I'm guessing that's a reference to super maximum security prisons or the guy who made the song It Ain't Easy. I'm assuming the former.
Yeah, that's correct. In a nutshell, the album is about struggles, both politically as well as personally. When I was really compiling these tracks and just conceptualizing the entire album, I realized that it is very heavy in that sense, and it's kind of about the capacity to actually manage and control and keep all of this in.
That being said, do you think that these songs are separate from each other, or are they in any way connected by narrative, emotion, origin, or otherwise?
I think it's thematic. They're connected thematically, but they're all about very different things. Although a lot of it is, personal experiences from within the last few years or so.
Explain some of that. Define personal experiences within sort of the scope of these songs.
Struggles like, just in terms of relationships, just dealing with economic hardship, things like that.
So, about the cover, what exactly is the origin story on the cover? Because it seems like a very widely edited photograph of what seems to be, I'm guessing, is a politician, but I could be wrong. So explain this cover a bit for me.
The man on the cover is Stepan Filipovic. He was a Yugoslavian partisan during World War II. It's actually the photo right before he was hung by pro-Nazi captors, and right before he was hung, he was giving this rousing speech encouraging everyone else to resist the occupiers of the land at the time. I just thought it was a very incredible photo. As a photographer myself, somebody who is interested in photojournalism, it just spoke volumes to me.
And as a person interested in sort of photojournalism, as you said, were there any other sort of historical photos that you've seen that either you have considered for future releases or were considering for this or past releases, for example?
Not quite. With my last album, it was actually a photo that I took myself, and I kind of almost would prefer to generally just do my own artwork. I'm not really one who uses captured imagery from other photographers generally for artwork. But this was just the exception for me.
So as far as this image goes, it's very heavily edited. So what was sort of the editing process? Were there any particular reasons you used the editing functions that you did, or was it just sort of, this looks cool and the original photo has a backstory that I feel like fits in with the album? Was it just happenstance? Explain more on that.
I just modified the photo just to almost in the best way possible that I could, at least reciprocate the idea of numbers. His image is multiplied, and as part of what he was doing at the time, he was trying to, pass on his legacy to encourage and inspire other people to join the struggle.
And on the cassette tape itself, it seems to be just like a regular label maker. Now, was this done out of stylization or just purely because that you couldn't afford to print directly on the tape?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
But I do like the aesthetic of that. I like how almost industrial and, very, just very bare bones.
You are essentially, you are a one-man band. So when you recorded this, how exactly was the recording process?
So, unlike my last album where I actually went to a studio and had somebody right there, guiding me and, not so much producing, but walking me through the paces, this one was done entirely at home, up until the point that it was time to be mixed and mastered. I had a friend, Chris, from Hook Echo Sound, who mixed and mastered it for me, but the recording process itself was strictly within my own house, my own apartment, and there was just like a few pieces I did also at work, after hours, again, just by myself. So.
Wow. And as far as recording goes, what equipment did you use?
I just had an interface, on my computer, and went straight into that for the synthesizers and such. I mic'd guitar parts here and there. I also did some direct recording too, for the guitars, and did vocals in a makeshift sound booth that I made in my bedroom. And yeah,
you definitely have, as far as your production goes, a very unique style as far as sort of the combination of sort of 80s gothic reverb and this modern almost clipping sort of to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting to sort of hear it and be implemented in such a in such an accessible form of songwriting. Now if as far as the mass amounts of reverb goes, what was sort of the origin for that sound in your songwriting?
Like you said, a lot of it kind of goes back to dark wave and post-punk kind of stuff like that. Being a solo act, I think part of it is the dynamic of compensating for just being one person, and so making your sound be as big as you can make it sound, as cavernous and just huge.
As far as being a solo artist goes, what sort of prompted you to even want to become a solo act? What because having your own setup and having your own sort of control with all these projects, in my experience as a solo artist myself, is very freeing, but at the same time it's very limiting and sort of disciplinary.
Yeah.
So when you were starting to sort of set up Charlatan as a project, as an album, as a first album, what sort of drove you to think, what, I could do this 100% by myself?
It started out actually as a side project. I was in a couple of bands before when this first started, and I was just kind of looking for an outlet for these ideas that I had in my head, but I didn't want to necessarily just start another band. So It started slow, it conceptualized, and I think over time it was almost pushing me in a way to just see how far I could take it and see how far I could go just as one person, controlling all of these elements. And it definitely has its challenges. Not being accountable to anyone else but yourself is difficult.
So at first was sort of out of a instinct that just this is a fun little side project that I'm doing along with all these other bands that I'm in, and then essentially it later became sort of your style, your voice that you found.
Yeah.
As far as your songwriting style goes, as far as these albums stand on their own, what do you want to add to the modern indie music scene, with your music and with your style?
Noise. Yeah. Just, I want to delve into that realm of still having a pop format, but making it almost experimental, and a bit more just challenging, I guess, in terms of normal conventions of what would be a pop format.
And as far as your influences go, as far as the pop side goes of it, you are obviously very influenced by these late 70s, early 80s gothic, post-punk, dark new wave bands, sort of. And it's very obvious where you get your influence from in that perspective. But as far as the noise rock scene goes, it's very, well, first of all, it's very abrasive for people to hear if they're just fans of, like, Paul McCartney and whatnot.
Right.
And so as far as noise rock goes, where did you find influence, and where do you think other people can find influence and sort of a tolerance if they're new to the scene for that genre?
Well, personally, where I'm coming from, one of my biggest influences is Daniel Ash from Bauhaus. His guitar playing is very, I guess, understated almost in a way with a lot of Bauhaus's tracks, and in a good way that segues into somebody who would want to get into that sound but isn't, like, really ready, I guess, to just listen to harsh noise or anything like that, And
as far as the people who are ready, what are some of the artists that you recommend for some hardcore sort of, like, I already like listening to really loud noise in my environment. How can I get that already pre-made sound? Like what artists? Like, normally people bring up Merzbow, who is probably the most popular noise rock artist in the scene right now. But are there any others that come to mind?
Personally, like, probably my favorite band, honestly, is A Place to Bury Strangers. And they're from Brooklyn. They've been around since the mid-2000s. And in a very similar way, I think they're kind of doing what I'm doing, and I'm very inspired by them, where they're kind of taking this dark wave sound, making it a bit more rock and roll, adding a bunch of noise to it without it being abstract, though. It's still, like what I'm doing in a pop song kind of format.
As far as your live setup goes, it's very spur of the moment, like I said, and it's very all right there in front of your face, have to figure out everything in a flash. First of all, that leaves a lot of margin for error, which I'm assuming by your immediate yup response that it's happened at least twice.
Right.
I'm gonna guess a ballpark estimate.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, how do you set up your live shows with the drum machines and all, and where has that gone wrong in some cases?
The good thing is that my drum machines and synthesizers are all sequenced. I've pre-wrote all of those parts, so those are actually nicely locked into these two machines I'm just running and syncing together. The most challenging parts, I think, are just the obnoxious amounts of pedals that I end up using. Vocals can be pretty chaotic. Amongst all the noise, you're just going to naturally get a lot of feedback with the mic, and it's the whole idea is just controlling that chaos. And yeah, I've had many times where I've just had cables just die in the middle of my sets, and I have this one pedal that its display is, like, permanently messed up. It's a digital pedal, and it just has garbled language on it now, and now I have to, like, remember where I put everything and just hope that I'm selecting the right things.
So in the middle of a set, in those situations where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just shit hits the fan, what's your response to that? Because you can't just, like, keep playing, but at the same time you can't just go, well, that's it. Like, what's your immediate response?
Well, the good thing is I've never actually had to cut a set short, and it's like my first reaction is just take a step back and cut out any elements that might be causing trouble immediately. If that's a pedal, I just stop using it and I just improvise some other sound.
Back to your songwriting, what exactly is your process for writing these songs? Like, how do you sit down and just write a song right there?
Each one kind of happens a little differently, but generally it's either going to start with me just sitting down with an acoustic guitar and just strumming something and coming up with some riff,
and then just sort of building on it over time.
Building on that, yeah. Or, oftentimes it'll start with me just starting with a drum beat, building bass synthesizer on that, then finding guitar parts. But that's generally how it goes, and then lyrics generally always come last. Sometimes I'll just be messing around on my guitar and messing around with pedals, and I'll just be like, that's a cool sound, and I need to use that now.
As far as the more experimental noise-based songs on SUPERMAX, or the noise-based interludes, how do you come up with those?
It's kind of weird. It's very improv. You know, a lot of the times it'll take the bits that the song ended at, and maybe I'll just, I'll do something different, a different pedal, just hit my guitar on something, just whatever is not conventional, I guess, really.
And just whatever happens.
Exactly.
And if it sounds cool, it sounds cool, and if it sounds bad, then in noise rock, that still sounds cool.
It's all right.
Yeah. So as far as making SUPERMAX or Charlatan goes, if we want to go back that far, what were some roadblocks that you sort of stumbled across while you were making these?
As far as like the actual recording goes, like I said, the first album was in the studio. Definitely had to book more time than I originally allotted. That was like the biggest struggle, was just time. And so that like kind of pushed me to, for this next album, just do it by myself, which was obnoxious because I ended up taking like 8 months to do it. But the good thing is I wasn't rushed. At the same time, I really felt like I needed to get it out there, and I was taking way too much time. So scheduling all these things and finding like good times of day to do things and not piss off my neighbors and things like that. Well,
you said you lived in an apartment. Recording an entire album in your apartment had to be a little. You had to have at least stumbled across one person knocking on your door, like, please, just please. Has that happened even once?
Believe it or not, it's never happened.
Oh my god!
I must have the coolest neighbors in the world. Because
either that or just like the ones with the loudest TVs. Because my god.
The good thing is that I went to my work after hours to record some parts. That was like the really loud stuff. The noise stuff that you hear in the interludes is actually mostly just at the apartment.
Oh wow.
So, and like I said, I recorded some guitar parts direct in also. So a lot of it was actually pretty silent, other than vocals, to be honest. Which worked out.
And you said that you recorded some of this at your work. Where exactly do you work, and how did that sort of implement into recording?
I work at the guitar store in Seattle.
Is it called the Guitar Store?
It's literally called the Guitar Store.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Everyone asks that. I know. It's super confusing. It's the one. The only.
It starts this conversation, though, so you don't forget the name of the store by the end of the conversation.
Right.
That's a plus. That's a good advertising technique for them.
Yeah.
As far as SUPERMAX goes, what track on there is like the standout track for you? If there's one track that you want people to listen to the most, then what is it? And is that any different than your favorite personal track?
Oh man, I would say Empire Comes Home is probably my personal favorite, as well as the one that I want to stand out.
And that's track
number 2.
Number 2. Back to your origin story a little bit. What exactly was the origin of the name Charlatan for both the self-titled album and the project itself?
It's not like a really like strong, crazy, awesome story. It's mostly just the idea of like a snake oil salesman, charlatan, taking that idea, and basically the idea of me being a one-man band, trying to sound like a full band, trying to sell that idea of sounding more than what it really is.
So in a way, you see your one-man bandness as snake oil.
Almost. Not in a very derogatory way, hopefully, but.
No, I understand, because like, do you see your solo style as do you worry that gets seen as a gimmick ever?
Yeah, definitely. you know, I think a lot of people are probably asking, why don't you have more members in this? Why are you trying to do this?
More as far as
you know, yeah. I think I get that a lot. Like, I think a lot of people are probably like, yeah, you should probably just get a drummer, you know. But I don't know. I think that's kind of the fun part, is just seeing how far I can take that.
It's the limitations that sort of drive you, as opposed to the idea itself sort of driving the project.
Exactly.
That's very respectful. I dig that. I dig that. As sort of a final question to wrap things up, what do you want? Where do you want this project, Charlatan, to go from here? What's your end game for the project? And is there any more projects to come after that aren't related?
The end game, I mean, I honestly don't have one. I just want to see again how far I can take it. That might involve me buckling and actually getting another person to join. But I don't know. Maybe it is to strictly keep it as a solo project too, and just keep on pushing myself in that direction.
And like plenty of people who do solo albums all the time have sort of collaborative efforts, and unfortunately the only one that I can think of right now is Watch the Throne, JC and Kanye West. But either way, it shows you that you can still like be true to your style and sort of at the same time have other people sort of join in, not as an addition, but sort of as a separate entity that sort of combines.
Right.
Yeah, not as much as a gray as it is sort of like a black and white. Yeah. So, glad to have this talk with you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to finish off, we are going to have Charlatan perform a small set for you. So, take a look. Thank you.